I'm hungry. Welcome to Crash Course with my AP World team. Wait, okay, I can't say that. Crap. Welcome to Cram Course. Alright, looks like you made it to the 1900s to today, the final era, where you were most likely were born. Sorta. Anyway, the 20th century is full of a lot of historical events throughout, well, the more recent historical events, like Cold War. But we'll be breaking it down into 3 different categories: science and environment, global conflict, and globalization. This is what most people call the contemporary era. The 1900s was when also the party got started. In worldwide technological renovations and revolutions. Renovations were in transportation, science, and communications sprung forth from the minds of scientists all around the world. Mostly in Europe, though. Scientists discovered that in the beginning of the 1900s, drastically changed man's views of nature, like the Renaissance did back all the way in 17-something. They started basing their discoveries more on observation and rationale instead of God and stuff like that. And so they began to advance technologies with said logic. People began to discover things like DNA and bacteria and all that other good jazz. But they didn't just discover that things were made of tiny molecules. They also made communication revolution, because in 1902, Marconi broadcasted a radio frequency from the UK in Cornwall all the way to Newfoundland in Canada. Yes, that's an actual place. I don't know. And which turned into a full radio broadcast in the 1920s out of Pittsburgh. 5 years after that, John Barrett transmitted the world's first TV signal. In 1947, Douglas H. Ring and W. Ray Young proposed the idea of cellular devices, and you know how that went with all the new smartphones and stuff like that. And then came the biggest train wreck in the entire world, the internet, in 1983. Speaking of trains, science also did a big contribution to transportation and energy, because bullet trains were made thanks to maglevs. Thanks, Japan. Diesel engines were a big hit with cars, and propeller-powered biplanes flew into the scene in World War I, but later replaced by their better flying cousins, jet-powered planes, in World War II and today. But in order to apply these new technologies, they had to make them from somewhere. So they had to expand with factories, which created more jobs, and also expanded the working class in several cities, and forcing people to create bigger cities. But in creating bigger cities, they needed more food, which also created more farmland. But all this expansion would eventually result in lots and lots of deforestation and making the global warming situation already worse than it was, because more factories, more CO2, more greenhouse gas. Yeah, you get the idea. But also, in addition with all of this new machinery, there also came more accidents. But in addition to that, those accidents also came more medical advances, which made people's life expectancy lengthen. And now people live up to 80, sometimes. I'm not sure about that, but still. So people live longer instead of dying younger. So yeah, thanks, medicine.
Okay, this is Andre. Technologies, an agricultural surplus, and improved health and medicine led to a worldwide population growth. Birth control gave women more independence and rights in a sense because they gave women control over their fertility and sexual activities. New and improved military technology such as the atom bomb and planes for warfare led to more casualties in warfare.
To move on from our topic, Spencer will be taking over outside the frame.
The Cold War has created many different outcomes around the world. Even when those results weren't all affecting the main countries that were involved, the Cold War itself had been created through problems that already been occurring, such as the different ethnic conflicts, national ideas, and the residue from the Great Depression. Going back to the topic of the outcomes of the Cold War, there had been many multiple results, one of which is military ability to gain power among others, creation of the atomic bomb, and the ability to travel in space around the Earth. That, of course, can mean the different satellites that would evolve or spying on enemy troops. Once all of that has been dealt with and been gone through, the end of the war is quite moving.
Thank you, Spencer. To add on, first of all, to mention how the Cold War has ended was the Berlin Wall being taken down, allowing for many to then see the tension to decrease. The Soviet Union themselves had a breakdown of small groups that created republics among them, to which had broken down the power of communism itself. Now the changes of the world from the Cold War after had been for many to create riots and movements that will try to help change what was happening in the different wars that had occurred. Although some others will take the opportunity to try and exploit those who have been down, that will then result for rises of elites in different communities to then push them down the lower class. Much like the Renaissance, they will also create art and speeches that will help spread that is happening to them, to then resolve the problems itself. To move on, I'll be transitioning to Spencer, who will be speaking outside of the frame.
The Cold War has created many different outcomes around the world. Even when those results weren't all affecting the main countries that were involved, the Cold War itself had been created through problems that already been occurring, such as the different ethnic conflicts, national ideas, and the residue from the Great Depression. Going back to the topic of the outcomes of the Cold War, there had been many multiple results, one of which is military ability to gain power among others, creation of the atomic bomb, and the ability to travel in space around the Earth. That, of course, can mean the different satellites that would evolve or spying on enemy troops. Once all of that has been dealt with and been gone through, the end of the war is quite moving.
Exactly. So to move on, first of all, to mention how the Cold War has ended was the Berlin Wall had been taken down, allowing for more to then see the tension to decrease. Soviet Union itself had a breakdown of small groups that created republics among them, to which had broken down the power of communism itself. Now the changes of the world from the Cold War after had been for many to recreate riots and movements that will try to help change what was happening in different wars that had occurred. Although some others will take the opportunity to try and exploit those who had been down, that will then result for rises of elites in different communities to then push down the lower class. Much like the Renaissance, they will also create art and speeches that will help spread what it is happening to them to resolve the problem itself.
Many governments developed free market economic policies and promoted more liberal economic ideas. Communist countries instead tried to control economies. Examples include Stalin's 5-year plan and Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward. Global interactions became more common and organizations developed in order to help deal with this. International organizations include the League of Nations, United Nations, and International Crime Court to facilitate international affairs, the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and World Trade Organization to deal with economic affairs. The economy became more globalized and consumer culture was more rampant. Presence of multinational corporations, which are companies with facilities and assets in countries other than its home country, became more widespread. Examples of multinational corporations are Coca-Cola and Sony. Movements protesting the inequality of
struggling with a lot of inequality during this period, women began to gain more control over their practices and their facilities. There was more involvement by women in their everyday life where they haven't been before. Jobs and opportunities allowed for women to have access in areas only men had, which was allowing women to achieve responsibilities that men had previously, granting them a greater sense of independence. The movement will be built on as women will also pursue the ideals of becoming as equal as men, which is known as feminism. Art and architecture played an important role when it came to expressing thoughts. There has been multiple paintings that were drawn in order to express the ideas that were involved. Not only that, but as leaders such as Nelson Mandela will also give speeches in order to gain the support of others on the topic. Many of these will try to have political changes. When the empires like the Ottoman began to face challenges defending itself against foreign invasion and occupation, the decline of empires also consisted of having internal and external factors along with being in debt and having social and economic discontent. Governments that wanted to be involved will use their own military to get engaged in the conflict, which will increase the tension between the other countries that were involved. That then worsened the situation as there are more statements and ideas that wanted to have superiority over the others. With the use of terrorist movements, people were able to strongly influence the government's political decisions and changes. Global conflict will affect the popular culture as it shifts to focus on different topics by different influential groups, such as the Beatles. Music and songs have been created in order to notify people about what has been happening in the world in hopes of changing the conflicts in the world, such as wars. Governments issued facilities that involve science, technology, medicine, and interrogation came about in times of difficulty during this period.